friends! What if I told you your grocery store has common foods like teas that can help you stay healthy to live longer? There's a Harvard longevity expert who takes supplements to boost something called NAD, a molecule essential for energy. And as you age, NAD drops. Less NAD means less energy. And when you have no energy, you get sick. But here's the wild part. The right common foods prepared in the right way can help you preserve your balance of NAD to keep you sharp, healthy, and full of energy. Randomly boosting it is not going to work. Here's the real deal on balancing your NAD. NAD is not just a longevity molecule. It's an essential molecule. And a healthy level potentially can make a difference in whether or not you're going to make it to your 80s healthy. Now, first of all, to be clear, I don't take his longevity supplement protocol, nor do I plan to. But I do agree with some of his principles for why he takes those supplements. However, for many people, supplements are just unaffordable. And frankly, if you can get an NAD boost from whole foods, then why wouldn't you? So here's my list. But just knowing this list may not increase your NAD levels because you don't know how much to eat or whether what you're already eating is actually destroying and lowering your NAD levels unless you learn how NAD works in your body. And if you only have a partial understanding of NAD, you'll be turning to the wrong longevity supplements or may go on the wrong dietary food restrictions that may bypass natural regulatory systems to make your body unbalanced. In other words, you may make yourself sick. And throughout history, people have done this and are still doing it, taking random supplements, eating the wrong kinds of trendy foods, and yet people are getting metabolically sicker. This is why you need to understand NAD and what will actually boost your NAD. And you will be shocked that the wrong way to meet your NAD needs can actually lead to chronic metabolic diseases. Now, I'm sure you have heard of ATP, the energy currency that fuels your body. Imagine your body is a big giant city and each little cell are kept alive with factories. And these factories keep everything running. So ATP is like gasoline. It's the fuel that powers the machines in those factories. NAD is like a spark plug or wire that helps to transfer the energy where it needs to go to the right machines, especially during chemical reactions that extract energy from food. So NAD transfers electricity to power vital machines that keep the factory lights on. When you have enough NAD, your factories are clean, efficient, and they run smoothly. And it doesn't matter whether you're on a keto diet or high carb diet. Metabolism that involves both glucose and fat need NAD. Basic cycles like glycolysis, TCA cycle, oxidative phosphorylation, they all keep your lights on. They all require NAD. You also need NAD to repair damaged DNA and to activate Sirtuins. Damaged DNA leads to fatigue, persistent wounds, autoimmunity, and diseases like cancer. And you may not heard of Sirtuins before. So I know I'm going in the weeds, I've been in the weeds, but I think it's important for you to understand your own body. We're not talking about cryptocurrency here. We're talking about your body. We are getting into metabolic trouble and sick because people don't have a basic background of how their biology works. Your doctor, chiropractor, naturopath, whatever random social media influencers that's reviewed death certificates, they can't fix your NAD gap. It's like learning how to read. They can't read for you. If you can't read a loan document or the fine print of a credit card disclosures, you will lose a ton of money. So if you can't spend the time to understand the details of your biochemistry, your metabolism, you will lose a ton of health. The good news is you can increase your NAD levels through common food choices and lifestyles. And I will try my best to make it easier for you to digest these metabolic players. So let's start with sirtuins, which are a special type of protein called an enzyme that helps your body stay healthy. You need it to repair damage. You need it for longevity. Now think of sirtuins like cellular janitors and bodyguards. They clean up damage, fix broken parts in your DNA. So they help your cells survive stress. The thing is, they don't work alone. They need NAD. Without enough NAD, your sirtuins go quiet. I'm sure you've heard that protein is the most important macronutrient for you to eat. Influencers are telling you to eat protein left and right. The thing is, Americans are getting more than an adequate amount of protein. We eat the most meat compared to any other country in this world. And yet, we are living the shortest lifespan and health span compared to other developed nations. Sirtuins are protein, but you don't get it from eating meat. And I think we're thinking about protein wrong. First of all, I agree muscles are important, but you don't get more muscles by eating more protein. You get more muscles by working out. And what about sirtuins? Well, when you exercise to build more muscles, you're actually activating your sirtuins. Sirtuins are mandatory to help clean up your body and regulate your immune system. Look at the list that I gave you in the beginning. These are not high-protein foods, but they've been shown to increase sirtuins. Sirtuins can change the proteins that regulate your DNA, histones. They simply remove a tiny little acetyl group, and just that little tweak, they can change your genetic expression. This is why sirtuins are really important. And for the biochemistry geeks, sirtuins are from a family of NAD-dependent deacetylases and ADP ribosyl transferases. Sirtuins regulate key processes like DNA repair, cell metabolism, inflammation, mitochondrial function, aging, and stress resistance. There are 7 types of sirtuins in humans, numbered sirtuin 1 to sirtuin 7, and each one works in different parts of the cell. Sirtuin 1 is linked to longevity. It's activated by exercise, fasting, and resveratrol found in the seeds and skins of grapes. Sirtuin 3 works in the mitochondria and improves energy efficiency. Sirtuin 6 is important for DNA repair and preventing inflammation. A few years ago, I ran a half marathon and almost didn't make it across the finish line. I was actually sick the week prior, and on the night before the run, I didn't sleep at all because I was coughing all night. I still showed up the next day because I promised my friend that I would do it. And honestly, it was the worst thing I've ever done in my body. I did not enjoy the entire process. I ached all over from my feet to my knees to my hips to my spine. And I'm really never going to run another half marathon again. Now, I don't mind walking it. I'm just not going to run a half marathon. And I remember when I almost made it to the finish line, there was an overweight photographer for a local newspaper sitting on an orange Home Depot paint bucket. And he said to all of us, "You guys can look like that, or you can smile and pretend you're having fun." Well, I was not having fun and not in the mood to pretend, so I did not smile. I honestly didn't have the energy to smile. I was running on empty. It was so bad that I thought I was running, but I looked over my shoulder and a couple ladies were walking faster than I was running. Sirtuins help cells respond to low energy, like during fasting or exercise. And obviously there's something wrong with my sirtuins, NAD and ATP, because I was out of juice. When you activate sirtuins, they switch on survival pathways, reduce oxidative stress, and they turn off inflammatory genes. They help repair DNA damage and support your mitochondria to be healthy. These are all key processes that slow aging and increase lifespan. They help keep you young. And as we grow older, our levels of NAD start to drop. In fact, by the time you're 50, you may only have half as much NAD as you did when you were 20. That's like trying to run a factory with only half the power, or run a half marathon when you're sick. It doesn't work. It's not good. So why does NAD start to drop? Because it fuels some really important enzymes for aging and longevity. Sirtuins repair DNA and help cells stay young. And there are other proteins that are dependent upon NAD metabolism too, like PARPs that fix DNA damage from sunlight or pollution. When you activate PARP, it takes away NAD from sirtuins. And that's why it's good to minimize sun damage and pollution. CD38 is a protein that breaks down NAD. And as you age, you actually make more CD38, which is not good to maintain your sirtuins. So when your NAD levels drop, those sirtuins can't do their job well. That means more DNA damage, more cellular stress, and faster aging. Now, the goal is to remove the stress so the PRP isn't activated and CD38 stays quiet. Basically, your NAD levels are dropping if you do nothing. In animal studies, increasing the animals' NAD levels have shown the animals to be younger, to run faster and further, and to regrow blood vessels. Okay, so how do you boost your NAD? We'll start with the list of foods that I gave you earlier. And I'm sure you're probably taking multivitamin or know someone who is taking a multivitamin because they want an insurance policy that they're not missing micronutrients. And if you're taking a generic multivitamin, you are helping your body make NAD if it has an essential vitamin called vitamin B3. The N for NAD stands for nicotinamide, which is a direct form of niacin, vitamin B3, a core part of the NAD molecule. And when you eat niacin, vitamin B3, your body converts it to nicotinamide, or sometimes called nicotinic acid, and that becomes the N part of NAD. So here's a basic path. Niacin is converted to nicotinamide, and then nicotinamide is converted into NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. Then that gets converted into NAD. Now people are taking NMN supplements to bypass this natural chemical reaction. Now, when you have excess nicotinamide, your body has to methylate it in order to secrete it. So you're putting pressure on your methylation system, which is also required to methylate other nutrients like folate, B12, and choline. Then the goal is to have a balanced ratio of NAD and NADH. That determines your ability to support your energy needs. So when you take an excess of NMN, you may raise your NAD, but then that changes your NAD over NADH ratio, which can actually stress your cells. It can clog your electron transport chain in your mitochondria and increase oxidative stress. High NADH may also trigger feedback inhibition mechanisms. Hence, I'm not taking NMN because nobody knows a safe dose to take NMN. Excess niacin is also not good. Cardiologists for decades promoted niacin way before statins as a way to fix bad cholesterol because it did lower LDL cholesterol and triglycerides and lipoprotein A and improves endothelial function. And when niacin was the only lipid-lowering agent around, it actually reduced fatal heart attacks. However, future studies show that niacin didn't actually work better than statins to reduce heart attacks or strokes. And high doses of niacin gave people pretty bad side effects like bad flushing, infections, liver inflammation, and insulin resistance. This is why the way in which you get your NAD is essential for your health and well-being. Now, of course, NAD helps enzymes like Sirtuins, PRPs, work, and it carries electrons for energy production. And the key component is a nicotinamide pyrimidine ring, a 6-member ring with 1 nitrogen atom. That nitrogen is essential. It's a site where NAD accepts or donates electrons. And this is how it switches between NAD and NADH. And really, it's a ratio between NAD and NADH that is super important in your ability to generate energy. Without nitrogen from nicotinamide, NAD couldn't do its job as an electron carrier or enzyme cofactor. So the rate-limiting step is niacin. And for such an essential process, you would think that your body would make its own niacin. And it actually can, just a little bit. Your liver can convert the amino acid tryptophan into a little bit of niacin. Only about 60 milligrams of tryptophan can make just 1 milligram of niacin. And the conversion depends on the availability of other nutrients like vitamin B6 or pyridoxine, iron, and riboflavin, vitamin B2. Missing any one of these other micronutrients will render your body unable to make niacin. And hence, the importance of eating a diversity of foods. However, in the US, we are eating restrictive diets, most of which are fad diets that have not stood the test of time. Now, have you wondered why the rest of the world isn't adopting our fad diets? They have learned through their history that restricting the diet in the wrong way is not a longevity thing to do. Now, I explained what happened if you got too much niacin or NAD. But what if you had too little? And what happens when you run on empty? Severe niacin deficiency or deficiency from vitamin B3 is called Pellegra. And if you're not eating niacin in your diet, or if you're not supplementing or not getting enough tryptophan in your diet, you are at risk of Pellegra. And millions of people, not so long ago, had Pellegra. There was actually an epidemic of Pellegra in Europe and the United States. specifically northern Italy and the southern United States. So the symptoms of Pellegra are known as the 4 Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and passing prematurely.
Hi friends, I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Now, the people who got Pellegra were usually people who eat predominantly corn and very little animal protein. Ironically, corn naturally has higher concentration of niacin, but unfortunately, humans can't absorb it properly unless you process the corn correctly. The corn has to be processed in alkaline water to make that niacin bioavailable. The people in northern Italy, they didn't do that. They ate polenta, which is ground up corn boiled into a thick porridge and set into a cake. It was a staple food for peasants and farmers in northern Italy starting in the 17th century. Now, corn is not a native Italian plant. It's actually not native to Europe at all. And it was brought over from North America to Europe. And instead of bringing over the traditions of Native Americans that were eating corn for like 9,000 years, people just assumed it was nutritious as is. I mean, how could it not be, right? It's delicious. It's sweet. The niacin in corn is in the form of niacin, which is chemically bound to other molecules in the grain. So your body can't absorb it because it's bound to something else. So you have to be able to release that niacin. And Native Americans figured out thousands of years ago how to do that. So Pellegra was not a disease that afflicted Native Americans whose staple was also corn. They used nixtamalization, an ancient technique that soaks and cooks the corn in alkaline water with lime or ash, which releases niacin from its bound form, making it bioavailable and also tastier. And the process was used to make tortillas, tamales, and other traditional Mesoamerican foods. And you know how people are. They like to invent their own diets, right? So the corn, which is a Native American plant that was brought to Europe and spread to Italy, Spain, France, and later to the southern US, started getting people sick because they didn't process the corn to get the niacin out. Hence, the Italians that ate a lot of polenta and the southern US states that ate a lot of cornbread, grits, and mush, they suffered from Pellegra. When corn is your staple food and you're not eating meat or legumes or supplementing with niacin, you're going to get Pellegra. The people ran out of NAD or energy. And like I said, NAD is essential to live. And in the past, Pellegra was common in people who ate low protein, corn-based diets. And this occurred even if they technically got enough tryptophan because the conversion was inefficient. But the thing is, people didn't get sick until they became more physically active. In the winter months when it was cold, everybody was indoors. They barely moved. So this allowed them to get away with very low niacin. They simply didn't need a lot of energy. But when spring came and these farmers had to go tend their crops, that's when they started to get symptoms. And the first symptoms started on their skin. They started getting dark, scaly skin lesions on their hands and face. They were tired. They had diarrhea. And then they went mentally insane. It was called Mal della Rosa, or disease of the rose, because they all got a red rash. Pellegra became endemic in northern Italy by the 18th and 19th centuries, affecting predominantly peasants and tenant farmers, especially those working on large estates, called the latifundia. Their diets consisted of polenta, salt, maybe some wine, and very little else. Pellegra was so rampant that Italy opened Pellegra asylums and hospitals starting in the late 1800s. And doctors, they debated whether the cause was toxic corn, infection, parasites, nutrient deficiencies, and ultimately they just encouraged people to switch to wheat, legumes, and to add milk. But those products weren't always affordable. The European medical community really resisted the nutritional explanation for a very long time. And many believe Pellegra came from toxic corn, bad air, or was hereditary. Or maybe, like I said, caused by an infection or parasite. It wasn't just Europe, though, that suffered Pellegra. Between 1906 and the 1940s, Pellegra became a major public health problem in rural southern United States, especially in cotton-growing states where poor people survived mainly on cornmeal, pork fat, and molasses, right? You're hitting all your calories, fat, and carbs. But the diet was low in niacin and tryptophan. And as the disease spread, it overwhelmed rural clinics and mental asylums. And this led to the creation of Pellegra-specific hospitals. In Southern Carolina in 1914, the Spartanburg Pellegra Hospital opened. That was the first Pellegra hospital in the United States. It was dedicated entirely to Pellegra and to find its cause. And the patients who were admitted were often poor mill workers, farmers, or prisoners. They basically had corn-heavy, protein-deficient diets. And many doctors thought Pellegra was caused by an infectious disease, or it was inherited because people were mentally going insane. Dr. Joseph Goldenberg, he actually changed that by proving that Pellegra was a nutritional problem. So he took healthy people and he gave them his Pellegra diet. And they all got sick, and then he cured them with meat, milk, and legumes. He even infected himself and others with the blood and saliva and the skin of Pellegra patients, but nobody got sick. You know, today, nobody's going to do that, right? Doctors aren't allowed to experiment on patients like that. We live in a different era. But back then, people were really desperate because by the 1920s and 30s, hundreds of thousands of people in the United States South suffered from Pellegra. There was over 3 million cases reported between 1906 and the 1940s, and at least 100,000 did not survive due to Pellegra-related complications. Many of the victims were women and children, especially among tenant farmers and cotton pickers, as well as textile workers. Now, this is why it's important to get enough niacin and to have enough NAD. So this is the most interesting part of the story. It's how these two countries fix their Pellegra crisis. Their solutions are totally opposite. However, both were very successful at eradicating Pellegra, but one country is now metabolically unhealthy and extremely obese, and the other country has some of the longest living people on earth. So what did they do different? Well, the northern Italians, they basically encouraged people to start growing a diversity of foods and eating different foods, including legumes, beans, lentils, and vegetables. They encouraged people to eat dairy and eggs when it was affordable and discouraged people to rely on only polenta as the only meal. So the northern Italians, they fixed their nutritional deficiency by encouraging a diversity of food and to eat real food, not to rely on such a narrow spectrum of options. By the 1950s, Pellegra had largely disappeared from northern Italy. The northern Italians have some of the longest living people in Europe today. And the northerners actually live longer than the southerners. Their women are living 85 plus years and their men reach about 83. So let's take a look at our country, the United States. They took a different approach to solving Pellegra. They started enriching and fortifying niacin to flour products. So your cereals, rice, cornmeal, refined wheat flour, and corn flour has niacin because they put it there. They believe that fortification helps to replenish the B vitamins that are lost during grain processing and that it can restore some of these vital nutrients so that it makes up for the lack of diversity. In essence, they started making ultra-processed food healthier. And it worked. The U.S. drastically reduced Pellegra ever since fortification began in the 1940s. However, today, the southern U.S. states have some of the highest obesity rates in America, and they have some of the shortest lifespan. Some of their states exceed 35 to 40% obesity, above the national U.S. average. They consume diets of highly refined foods and fast food with little nutrient diversity. They basically eat few whole foods, but they got their niacin fix to prevent Pellegra. So one country saw a nutritional crisis to help their people achieve longevity, and our country solved the nutritional crisis by sprinkling vitamins. So we traded in one nutritional crisis for multiple crises of metabolism, obesity, metabolic disease, cancers, heart disease, diabetes. and we shorten people's lifespan. Now, I'm not saying that the vitamins actually shorten the lifespan. I'm saying the lack of diversity, the eating processed food. And this is why if you want to increase your longevity, you got to get rid of the processed food and eat whole food. Do not count on food fortification to meet your nutrient needs. Now, I do believe there's a role of supplements to fill in their nutritional gap, but supplements cannot make up for bad food. Supplements to me are like an insurance policy, which has been there given to us to increase our health span and memory. And your NAD requirements will be dependent upon your energy needs. So if you're sedentary, you're not going to need as much NAD as the marathon runner, as a person who's fighting a cold, or as a person who's metabolically active and walking around and hitting their steps. The Northern Italians have proven that you can get your NAD from just eating whole food. We don't need to eat longevity supplements. And in fact, I don't think those supplements will make a difference if we're not eating our whole food. Now, some people think that these vitamins are causing the US obesity crisis. And honestly, I would disagree with that. We've been fortifying food since 1940. If fortification actually caused obesity, we should have seen obesity rise in the 1940s and 50s. Obesity doesn't take that long to happen. Just take a look at our children now. Children born now have a higher rate of diabetes and metabolic obesity in their childhood. So we don't need several decades of eating poorly to destroy our metabolism. You just need to eat toxic foods on repeat every day. People didn't start changing their body habits until the 1960s and 70s, when processed foods became more abundant, filled with high fructose corn syrup and oils. In the 1960s, 13% of the US adults were obese, but by the late 1970s and 80s, that started going up to 15% and then 23% by the 1990s. Around this time, we had an explosion of ultra-processed fructose corn syrup and portion sizes that became massive. We were eating tons of calorie-dense fast food and promoting the culture of snacking. And also around this time, people stopped cooking. We had a rise of convenient foods. So food fortification, it got us out of a nutritional crisis. And I think the problem is the US began thinking of food not as a whole matrix, but we thought of it as parts and pieces of vitamins and minerals, proteins, fats, and carbs. We are thinking of food as individual nutrients, but they are not. Food is more than just a bunch of nutrients glued together. It's more than just calories. There are thousands of micronutrients that give us health that isn't on our essential micronutrient list at this time. And this is why eating whole food is so protective. You also eat less calories because when you eat whole foods, you tend to chew more. Chewing activates satiety hormones that tell you when to stop eating. And when you're chewing whole food, you're also getting fiber and micronutrients that haven't been extensively studied. The deficiency of them haven't proven to give you a disease like niacin. So people discount their benefits. There's one thing to be deficient and empty. There's another to be inadequate or in abundance. Take carotenoids, for example. There's over 600 different carotenoids that serve as antioxidants to reduce inflammation. They give us eye health to maintain our vision. They support our immune system to fight infections, and they're important for your skin health to protect you from UV radiation. And when you eat carotenoids, you are eating red, orange, green colored whole foods. And that's why I personally strive to eat 50 different whole foods a week, even though I still take supplements. But I eat these foods because these antioxidants help to preserve my NAD levels, helps to decrease my PARP levels. And a lot of the power is in the flavonols that are responsible for the color of fruits and vegetables and flowers and leaves. The flavonols, they can inhibit CD38 enzyme that destroys NAD. Red cabbage, blackberries, they have flavonols called cyanidins, one of the most effective CD38 inhibitors. Another flavanol is quercetin, found in marigold flower tea, which has a potent CD8 inhibitor. I've never had marigold flower tea, but I've tried chrysanthemum tea, which has luteolin that also inhibits CD38. Tonight, my son made a spaghetti. It had oregano. Well, I'm getting luteolin. Curomanin is another inhibitor that is found in this hibiscus tea. It's also in blackberries. Remember, blackberries also have cyanidins, and they grow wild in Washington and Oregon. Now, the niacin in corn is trapped until you alkalinize it, right? Well, if you eat purple corn, it also has curomanin. And if you watch my other videos, you know that red sorghum is a great grain full of antioxidants, and it has less starch. It contains luteolindin, another flavanol shown in rat studies to increase NAD. Another flavanol, apigenin, also boosts NAD by inhibiting CD38. You can find apigenin in parsley and in chamomile tea. I can go on and on about the benefits of flavanol, like quercetin, found in a variety of fruits and vegetables like apples, that have NAD boosting properties if you eat your food whole. If you eat an apple a day, 1.5 teaspoons of cocoa powder a day, half a cup of blueberries, or 2 plums, you can actually increase your NAD levels by 50%. And when you eat foods whole, you don't just get one flavanol. For example, when you eat dark chocolate, that cocoa has over 50 distinct flavanols. Unfortunately, if you buy the wrong cocoa, it can have 0 because food processing can process out all the flavanols. Remember how processing corn with lime releases more nutrients, like niacin? But if you just process it like the Italians to make polenta, you would not get the benefit of niacin, right? And that actually costs millions of lives over 2 continents. Hence, it's really important to know and to understand how your food is processed. Coca is a fermented food. Fermentation develops its flavor and reduces its bitterness. So raw coca nibs has the highest flavanol content and it is minimally processed. However, if you roast it and add flavor and then high heat, you can actually degrade the flavanols. So lighter roasts are much better for the preservation of flavanols. Now, alkalizing corn is a good thing, but alkalizing coca is not. People like it because it makes it taste less acidic, but you destroy the majority of the flavanols. This is called Dutch processing, which loses 95% of its flavanols, which essentially nullifies all the benefits of chocolate. So I would not eat Dutch processed coca or chocolate. Hence, it's important for you to learn where your food is coming from and how they treated your food. In the US, our food quality is in the toilet. That's why we're getting sicker. We are removing the most beneficial parts of the plant, but we enjoy the flavors and textures that the starch and the sugar and fats are creating. And the foods we eat can't give us health because they're incomplete nutrition. If you think about it, it took the world over 150 years to solve the nutritional crisis for one single vitamin, niacin. And doctors had to lock patients up and literally fed them restricted diets to work out the science. And today, we're debating on why the body habitus of people are getting bigger and bigger in the last 50 years. In 2019, Dr. Kevin Hall got volunteers to voluntarily agree to lock themselves up to eat ultra-processed foods and compared it to eating nutritionally dense, healthy foods. And he proved that ultra-processed foods made people eat several hundred more calories a day to explain why people are gaining weight. Dr. Hall has been one of the groundbreaking pioneers of nutrition science at the NIH for our generation. And unfortunately, the political climate has been so bad that he took an early retirement. He said he was being censored. Now, if the government doesn't sponsor nutrition research, really nobody's going to do it. There's no point for any processed food company to prove that their stuff is bad for us. And of course, it works in their best interests that scientists are leaving or silenced. Now, personally, for me, I don't eat processed food. So it doesn't affect me personally. I am convinced all this processed food is a devil in disguise. However, I'm very practical, and my family and my friends, they all still eat processed food. And I hang out with them. They hang out with a lot of people who eat processed foods. Birds of a feather flock together. If your son's friend eats pizza, your son's going to eat pizza. People give in under pressure, especially kids. So I personally would love to see the food system get cleaned up. And I believe it'll get cleaned up if consumers start boycotting ultra-processed food. The most effective change comes from market-driven forces from the ground up. And the less processed food we buy, then companies will start making healthier food. But it's hard to start if you don't have practical food replacements and some basic cooking skills. In order to make America healthy again, you have to make America cook again. And if you want to learn more about that, watch the next video.